Proposals to establish standing committees.
Lights, just one more quick time. I'm not sure whether this will be real readable up there from a distance. It's probably not, but I'll basically read through the board. Members all have a copy of this, and I apologize, I don't think that's readable from there, but I'll go through it quickly. I asked this item to be put on the agenda for tonight, and I'll read through what that says. It says I have 3 proposals to offer. My primary purpose in offering these proposals is to enhance the ability of the elected officials of the town of Waukesha, obviously that's us, and some of the employees and retained consultants of the town of Waukesha to perform their duties. The 3 proposals that I have to offer are as follows. Proposal number 1 would be, without delay, establish several standing committees, each of which would be comprised of either 1 or 2 members of the town board, selected from the 5 members of the town board. Appointments to the standing committees, including the designations of the chairpersons of the standing committees, if they existed of 2 people instead of 1, should be made by the town chairperson. Some examples of standing committees that should be established, arranged in alphabetical order, subject to rearrangement, there's no significance to that, are as follows. The Building and Grounds Committee, Finance Committee, Parks Committee, a Personnel Committee, Human Resources if you prefer by name, a Public Works Committee, and perhaps others. I identified 5 of them. The second part of that first proposal for the standing committees would be to incorporate a section into the agenda of each meeting of the town board entitled Reports, and a subsection thereunder entitled Standing Committees, and list these standing committees thereunder. Require the chairperson of each standing committee to provide a report at each meeting. On issues of substance, the chairperson should provide written reports to the town clerk treasurer prior to the meeting, so the reports can be reproduced and included in the packets of information that are distributed to members of the town board, typically a week or at a minimum several days prior to the town board meetings. At a minimum, the town clerk treasurer should make specific reference in the agenda to those items that are action items, and if a chairperson has nothing to report, he or she should try it again. If a chairperson has nothing to report, he or she should simply state no report. Proposal number 2 is, when appropriate, establish special committees, unless otherwise directed by the town board. Members of the special committees may, but need not be, members of the town board. Appointments to the, and I have a typo here, for which I apologize, it should say appointments to the special committees, including the designation chairpersons. The special committees should be made by the town chairperson. Similarly, as with the standing committees, include a section in the agenda of each meeting of the town board entitled Reports, and a subsection for special committees, and list of the special committees thereunder. Require the chairperson, and I won't read that, it's entirely the same as the standing committees. When there are issues of substance for them to report on, they would do those at the town board meetings. If there's nothing for them to report, they can reply no report. If someone has a preference to call those special projects instead of special committees or whatever, is fine with me. And proposal number 3, and submit to you, if you look at our town ordinances, there's language in them that as much as suggests what I'm asking for in proposal number 3, and that would be to incorporate the section into the agenda of each meeting of the town board entitled Reports, and a subsection there under entitled Consultants and Staff, or words to that effect, below which the following listing, subject to addition, clarification, modification, should appear. I gave some examples. We have, and again, these are in alphabetical order, but a town accountant, a town assessor, attorney, Mr. Delamore is here tonight, an auditor, building inspector, clerk, treasurer, again regularly, clerk, treasurer, Salentine would be here, engineer, fire chief, Chief Kukos regularly attends, the planner and zoning administrator. I should back up. Typically, we do get a monthly report from the town fire chief, planner and zoning administrator, and town sheriff who usually get a report from. So my purpose in that, and I'll open this up for comment in a minute, is to try to offer something constructive to the town board. We have struggled a bit, I think, in terms of trying to organize ourselves, to find ways to run meetings that are efficient and organized, a little bit stumbling over ourselves. So these are constructive suggestions that I'm offering. I think they're not unique, very commonly done in municipalities. I know one other thing too, even why I think it's timely to consider this. Previously, this town board forever had been comprised of a chairperson and but 2 supervisors. Kind of hard to have committees with 3 people. This board was expanded to 5 people, a chairperson and 4 supervisors 2 years ago. I think we could be much more efficient in terms of dealing with the many issues before us and better able to serve our consultants if we look at an organizational structure in this manner. So I'll pause and certainly entertain any comments that you would have, and I would encourage you to give this serious consideration. Thank you.
My first, after I read this, Brian, I thought about some examples of things that we're already doing this. As an example, Jamie, yourself, and myself are on a committee working on the HR manual. Angie, Tina Reese from the Plan Commission, and myself are on a committee handling the well testing. We did meet. We did provide some work, and we'll provide a report back to the board in writing. Starting this month, Mike Laska, Jamie, Chief Buckholz, and myself are on a committee working on the purchase order policy. Everett and myself met on preparing a letter of guidance with regard to the bypassing schedule on January 24th to provide feedback to the full board as to the drafting of a letter to address the current route that's known as the bypass road. And almost a year ago, you and Angie were appointed as a committee designated to working on Town of Brookfield incorporation issue. We've been, in my glance, we've been acting largely in the spirit of what you've written here. I mean, there isn't a formal written policy, there aren't formal written reports. There was with the well testing one, because that was data that was analytical and could be drafted in written form. I guess my walkaway question was, how is what you're proposing, other than the agendizing of those reports and formalizing committee appointments, how is the practical application of the examples I've given different from what you've written?
Sure, good question. I think what you have done is cited some examples of what we're doing, and perhaps a not formalized name for it is proposal number 2, special committees. So it sounds to me as though you embrace that, which I appreciate. What I think you're missing in part of it is standing committees. I'm suggesting we need standing committees. As an example, we are now basically all invited to come every Wednesday morning at 9:30 to a Public Works Department staff meeting. I have attended the first, how many we had? 4 of those or whatever. I don't think that's efficient use of our time to have all of us attend that. I would prefer to see a standing committee of that. who can deal with the day-to-day ministerial kind of issues, and have them then report big issues to the board. The other things that the standing committees, I think we need, so that when an issue comes along, such as this thing with the septic system that we've stumbled all over, we would say, that is something that ought to be referred to the Building and Grounds Committee, take it away and get back to us. I think we could save some time, be far more efficient. My third proposal there is to have reports from, at least an opportunity, from the town attorney, from the clerk treasurer. We used to have our weekly staff meetings where we dealt with many issues that the clerk treasurer had to bring before us. We've not had any of those since August, and I'm not necessarily bemoaning that fact, because I think we all question how productive they were, but she needs to have a forum to bring things to us. So you've embraced proposal number 2. Appreciate that. I guess I would ask you also to think seriously about 1 and 3, because I think this would just give us a whole lot better structure and accountability to both ourselves and communication as well as our constituents.
I feel number 3, Mr. Fischer, is very important. It would give us the opportunity to track what our professionals are doing. You know, we used to receive a report from planners. We haven't had that in several months now. I don't know what happened to that. The accountant, we have not received anything from the accountant. That was supposed to be on a quarterly basis. Town attorney, we have never received anything from Hector. Have we, Hector? Up-to-date report.
Not monthly report. And mainly because I was told when our firm was hired that we should respond to requested services. And we've never been requested to submit any formal reports. On balance, to the extent that inquiries have come to our office, we've attempted to be responsive in that regard.
Pretty much what I noticed when we receive your bill is what I go through and try to determine what you have been working on, or where we're at with anything. I think a report would be very efficient and beneficial to the board.
Our firm will do whatever the board wants to do. That was our commitment in the beginning, and it continues to be.
I would support number 3 also, Mr. Fischer.
No surprise, I have a couple of comments on this. Let's start with the representation of, perhaps we haven't had committees. We've had committees from the beginning. I believe that Mr. Bansky and Mr. Everett were on the insurance review committee, and they've now met twice, so that counts for at least 2 years. We've broken into committees many different times. We've also, during that time, had some very significant issues that we were dealing with. So the refinement of our management structure and how we go about doing that, we're certainly in a position now to be able to do some of those things. The characterization of the DPW meetings, I think, is a bit disingenuous. When that meeting was offered, it was offered to be open to anyone who had an interest. The DPW is plowing snow this year. They are also overseeing our plowers. We've had many board members who have had very significant interest in how that would go about, and that was to provide a forum for any and all board members who had an interest in what was happening DPW related, and specifically snow, to have a place that they could come and hear each other's issues, question DPW, and feel comfortable and confident that things were being handled appropriately. There's absolutely no requirement for any one of you to attend if you have no interest to do so. It is basically a committee, and I chair that committee at this point in time per this board's direction. And if folks are interested, I hope you come. It's important. I think it's important for us to have places where we can talk to our staff, be productive, and not waste their time either by having 5 individual conversations. This is one meeting, lasts 5 to 10 minutes. Those of you that are interested are welcome to attend. The staff meetings were meetings that were discontinued because they were simply dysfunctional, and I don't think we need to go any further on that. Working as groups, working as teams is very important. That hasn't always been possible here in the town of Waukesha. And I hope we get back to the ability at some point in time here to work together versus to try to find ways to hurt each other and in that way hurt the town. I think it's important that we work together. So this is not on for action this evening. I think the entire management of the town and how we go forward is something that there should be discussion by the board. I think the type of effort that it takes to manage a community our size may not be sufficient to have just board members take care of, because board members change, and their ability and their backgrounds and their interests change. And the work that needs to be done here at the town of Waukesha is constant. And so in other communities, they have additional layers, and people who, it doesn't matter who's elected, you have some stability, and that can be in the form of an administrator. That was something that was proposed here in the town of Waukesha previously, but had not gone forward. So I think there's obviously different ways for us to go about reviewing ourselves, but we certainly do have committees. It's certainly important to work with committees, and it's certainly important for those committees to be attentive to their issues. So I think we should continue to work through the best way of doing this, and I suggest that we have perhaps a workshop or a meeting specifically for this as to how we foresee the future. I believe it's a bit premature since we are anticipating a race here, an election in April. I think it would be important for any decision on this to wait until after the new board is settled, and that way they can organize themselves as the way they see fit. We're only 2 months, 3 months out from that, and that way, we can impart to them, whoever it may be, the information we have. And that would be my suggestion.
If I could make a couple of comments. I mean, I appreciate the fact, for those of you who are spoken, that you're willing at least to consider and discuss these things. I guess I would ask that this be put, and there may be some merit in what you're saying, to wait while an election is at hand, but I guess I would ask that this continue to be put on future agendas as a standing item. If anybody has a comment that they would like to offer in direct response, Chairperson Van Sock, to what you said, I'll illustrate. And I didn't say in my presentation we have never had some designated assignments or whatever. That's certainly true, but we have not had standing committees. Here's where I think a real issue, a real concern, particularly with the Public Works Department or Public Works Committee. If you look at last year, for example, with snow plowing, we had Supervisor Bansky who was to kind of be in charge of that, and you were for some period of time until, for whatever reasons, you weren't. I know then Supervisor German and Chairperson Van Sock were giving contractor directions and so forth. That ended up being a lot of confusion, in my judgment, misplaced efforts, a source of a lot of problems. I mean, as we sit here today, I guess I would even ask, who is it that is giving day-to-day direction to our public works people? Is it you, or is it Supervisor German? And I think that your answer to that might take up.
I can answer that question. It's definitely not me.
Is it you?
Well, we're all aware that that decision was made several months ago, and that we would have, a change along with the snowplow contract. And we also talked about at that point that there would be weekly meetings because of everybody's interest in the DPW and everybody's, it's a great idea to have committees, but that means that people who aren't in the committees have to trust those people that are in those committees. That hasn't exactly happened lately, gentlemen. And so we have, not through my request, been basically a group on everything, because very little has been left to other people, unfortunately, because there doesn't seem to be the ability for those folks to move forward. So that is why you were all invited to the DPW. They provide, as you know, when we had our very first meeting, when all of us were there. Is this on? No, we're not even going to discuss this any further. This is not an agendized item, so I think this is really
I guess I'd like to offer one comment. I don't know where you were going, but in my sense of it, if you read our town ordinances, I don't have the exact section here, it talks about committees. And any time a committee has a formal meeting for a particular time and place, such as we're doing with the weekly DPW meetings at 9:30, those do need to be noticed, and there are public meetings. So even if it's but a single person of the town board or two people who are here, we don't have to vote, those are public meetings and they have to be publicly noticed meetings. I'm absolutely for that. What I am opposed to, because I don't think it's worthy of our time. I appreciate saying anybody that wants to come to the meeting can come, but to expect 5 people to come to those meetings and to talk about, you know, roadkill or that type of thing, it doesn't take 5 town board members to get to that level of micromanagement. The flip side to it, I'm not for a minute suggesting we establish these standing committees. And the issue of trust, I think you bring up a good point, that these people can just go do darn well whatever they please. They're reportable and accountable to this entire board. They can basically do the field work, the background work, just as I have tried to do with the septic system, and bring the information forth in a timely manner so the board as an entirety can evaluate it and make decisions. That, in my personal experience and business experience and everything, you've got to find that line where you can do some delegation of responsibility, some measure of trust, but those people have to be accountable, or you're just going to fall all over yourself.
Mr. Fischer, if I understood you correctly, then the meeting that you have had with Mr. Bansky, and perhaps the meeting that was just held by Mr. Drummond and Mr. Bansky, should have been noticed committee meetings?
I guess I will back up for a minute. I wasn't even aware of the fact that Mr. Bansky and Mr. German had a meeting. If they are a committee or a standing committee, and they decided to meet, and hopefully think at the town hall at a certain point in time to discuss a certain issue, then it probably should have been a formal meeting. If they had a telephone call and talked back and forth over the phone, no.
In your meeting with Mr. Bansky on personnel matters?
If in fact Mr. Bansky and I are the personnel committee or the human resources committee, and we decided to meet at a particular point in time, yes, read your town ordinances, then that should have been noted as a meeting of the personnel committee or human resources committee. I agree.
Okay.
Mr. Fisher, with the snow last year, whenever I dispatched the Public Works or the snow contractor, I would email the clerk with the time, the amount of equipment I sent out, and what they were doing. So on a daily basis, the board knew what was going on. That has not happened this year. So,
That's really not an item for this meeting, but since you bring it up, the contract and the process was discussed at a board meeting, and the process determined, and we're following that process. If there's a change that the board members would like to make, and in fact, at the very first meeting of the DPW, we discussed any and all communication. Nobody brought anything up. So if someone under referrals and concerns, number 6, would like to raise those issues and have them in a meeting, they're welcome to request that be on the agenda, and we will discuss it further. But to say that it hasn't been discussed and things haven't happened is simply untrue. So if there is nothing further, we'll move on unless there's further discussion on this particular noticed item, which is to establish committees.
so what are you looking for, Mr. Fisher? Approval to establish these committees, a motion, or just discussion?
Yeah,
Mr. Fisher, this is, as Mr. Fisher, you're going to say it's discussion on this?
No,
Yes.
I will tell you what I did say. I asked in the email communication that I sent to Clerk Treasurer Salentine last Friday at 9:20 a.m. to put this onto the agenda. It was put on under current business, item 4. I wasn't going to go down this path, but as long as the issue was raised. This is not current business, it's new business. I asked in the email that I sent on Monday, when the agenda was modified to move this to new business. It wasn't, it's under current business, which allows for discussion only. It doesn't belong under current business, it's new business, but that's the way it was agendized, so we can do nothing more tonight other than discuss it.
That's correct. Anything further?